Yeah, there's a lot of pessimism on the part of folks of thinking that there could be a nationwide provider of white spaces, because the way the spectrum sharing has been set up, TV stations and microphone users, that's the people that have concerts, they'll occupy almost all the white spaces spectrum in the cities. But there are certain ways that we talked about during the conference, in particular the TV reallocation, incentive auctions, and a form of doing that on a private basis that could really change that dynamic.
Can you say that in English?
Marty, can you explain about the incentive?
Sure, yeah.
Private incentive auction?
Right, so basically what Barlow is talking about is the FCC is talking about taking spectrum currently used for broadcast and basically reallocating a portion of that spectrum, basically packing down the broadcasters into a smaller number of channels, and then deploying the rest of the spectrum for mobile wireless broadband, something called flexible use. The question we were talking about is basically what happens to white spaces if that happens. And really, what was really exciting, I thought, Barlow, is that depending on how the FCC does that, there's actually a possibility of making more spectrum available for white spaces. And actually, if rather than taking all the broadcast spectrum and reallocating it, you instead maybe give broadcasters more flexibility, allow broadcasters actually to do marketplace deals, including with white space providers, that might actually be a way of more quickly rolling out spectrum and really getting it done. And it seemed to be, as we were talking about that over the last couple of days, there's quite a lot of energy around that concept, which is something that interested me.
Yeah, well, one of the things it'll do is it would enable white spaces to be used in the urban areas. The reason that white space is being used in the urban areas is so important is because one idea that they came up with white spaces was that you could come in and create a new cell phones company like LightSquare. But if you can't roll out that sort of business in the urban areas, you won't have the numbers to drive down the cost of the mobile devices that you carry with you. So once you can use mobile devices with a fixed tower in a city, all of a sudden you allow a carrier to be in the city, and you can drive down the cost of those cell phones, the new white spaces cell phones, if you think of them that way. I mean, one of the really other kind of exciting pieces that of white spaces is the database and the cognitive radio. And what that basically means is that the radios and the handsets will be able to speak to a database to determine if there is any spectrum available that they can use. This is the first time in the world that this has been accomplished or put into an order. And so that would allow the radio to know which spectrum was available and in their particular area, the best spectrum that was available, and it could select between that. And so the idea is that you could not only use this for white spaces, which is where you have the TV channels, but you can use it in other spectrum that's not being used. It's lying fallow right now.
Right. Well, and so we heard from a number of tech companies, a number of radio companies out there who basically have these cognitive radios under development, are hoping to get approval from the FCC even as quickly as, in maybe the April timeframe, the May timeframe, which, so this is actually going to push, also exciting, is going to push developments in other areas. Basically what these radios do is they, you roll out a radio that has the capability of going from 0 megahertz to 2.5 gigahertz or something like that. That's an exaggeration. And then basically it can intelligently pick the spectrum, the power, and whatever based on the particular needs. So building on that was what I think was also probably, this is something we're going to be hearing a lot more about, is something called secondary markets, and basically sort of a secondary market in spectrum. So there's the idea is that there is a ton of spectrum out there actually that is not being used currently. It's basically, it may be used from time to time, it may be held, maybe laying fallow, maybe held It may be held in inventory, but it's not being used at the moment. And the idea is you can develop actually real place marketplaces that will be working with intelligent radios. So these are the database guys talking to the radio guys, basically selecting spectrum and basically using it, and it just will make for more efficient use of spectrum, also create a secondary market, which is also pretty exciting, I thought.
Yeah, there are quite a few applications. The interesting thing about white spaces, and this was really confirmed as a result of several tests they've done across the country, is that the white spaces has the ability to basically be 4 times the amount of reach that you get with Wi-Fi. And that's why they call this Super Wi-Fi. And so the same radio that you would have for Wi-Fi can, let's say, reach way outside your home, reach your whole block. And that way you could cover either a rural area where there's very little coverage and you're trying to reach people that right now can't get coverage. And some of the WISP were there. That's a wireless internet service provider. We're there at the conference. And also you could have these in an urban area, and you could basically cover a town with white spaces devices, very low powered white spaces devices that would act sort of like the Wi-Fi mesh networks that attempted and failed to roll out in the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm. And so the idea would be, right, so what would be financeable, right? So the idea is, as opposed to a top-down business model, you basically have a bottom-up business model where basically it's, I think the term is 1,000 stories in the naked city, Barlow. I don't know, you may be too young for that. I know.
I am too young.
I'm too young for that show, too.
1 million stories in the naked city.
Well, there you go, 1 million stories in the naked city. But the idea being that every market is different, and basically there will be different